Well, I think I've just about finished everything I need to do with this, which is good. So I'll go over some of the things that have been done by me. First off, the mains wiring. I've covered the terminals with some goop, hot glue gun, just to prevent me from accidentally brushing against it with my hand. It's all very dangerous, typical 70s stuff. Redid some of the looming with some fishing line and zip ties, made it a little bit neater, laced the mains a lot better. Now initially the resistor there was meant to be getting too hot, but actually it's working fine. It's dissipating 4 watts and it's a 7 watt resistor. It feeds the large solenoid just there. That's working all right. The first problem I came across was this Microswitch sensor here. Now it was basically a matter of adjusting it so that it was just touching the lever when the cassette's there, so that when you take the cassette out it pushes it closed as much as possible. That the range of movement there is terrible. It's not very good at all, and I've had to readjust it a couple of times because it had changed. Hopefully now that it's back in, it won't have to move again. There is a slot here and here whereby you can place in a large flat blade screwdriver and slightly twist it, and that way you can adjust it, which I didn't realise at first, but you can. And in fact I did set some nail polish before, but I'll do it again because I've had to readjust it again. Just a little bit of nail polish there just to prevent any untoward movement, but who knows for sure. The output knob was in the wrong position. The center knob is actually with the market at the 6, which is about 1 o'clock or something. That central notch in the volume control is not meant to be up in the middle. It's meant to be on number 6, and that's in the operating manual as to why that is. You set the output level with a standard tape with that set to 6, which is the notch. So I've moved it from where it was back to number 6. What else? I've used a little bit of Deoxide, just a little, to clean up those slide switches which are on the main motherboard. Now they were pretty good though, so it wasn't a problem. In the mechanism there was many things that had to be done. Basically oil and grease change. The 3-prong spring that was on the back side of the flywheel was the wrong way, so I turned that round the right way. The next thing of note is that the idler wheel, the spring that pushes it up to work in rewind or fast forward or play, was very weak, so I had to shorten the spring by about 2 or 3 rungs on the spring to make it a lot more forceful, and it just wouldn't work until that was done. Maybe it worked when it was new. Maybe there was enough grippiness in everything for it to actually work, but after lots of use and whatever, no, it was just far too slippery, and it only needed the slightest amount of upward force and it would then work great. So needs a stronger spring, and I did it by shortening that spring slightly. But make sure that it doesn't interfere with the action of the arm behind. You shorten it on the pivot of the arm, not on the frame of the plastic. Right, next thing, I swapped the the pinch rollers from left to right, right to left. They're mostly okay, but on the right hand side, the take-up side, it was a little bit grooved, so I swapped it over to there and put the much better looking one here, where this is really the most important one. This one on the left is for just good tension. What's next? Yes, and by doing that, the height of this left-hand pinch roller, I tried to put it back where it was in the beginning, with a spring length here of 4.56 millimeters, but by using the alignment tape, I found that it was actually 4.4 millimeters. It's an arbitrary measurement, but that made it work. You cannot set the height of the record playback double head. It's fixed, but you can adjust the azimuth, which I eventually did, and the azimuth is adjusted. Of course, as I say, grease and oil change on everything I could. Now, these switches for the buttons were a little bit dicky. They were a bit unreliable, so I gave them a bit of a clean with Deoxide. Once again, not too much, just enough to make them work, and that really helped them a little bit. And part of this problem was because this cassette sensitive microswitch was just borderline, and it was flickering, and that was causing the little lights on the switches to go off and on weirdly, and it was because this switch up here was just touching. And so by adjusting that microswitch to work more correctly, that went away. However, more recently I discovered that by quickly pressing pause, it would cause other actions to happen, and to me that's some kind of button bounce, ground bounce, some unreliable switching that was occurring. Now, since that happened, I haven't been able to reproduce it. However, to try and preempt anything happening in the future, on the control board there's a huge chip that does all the controlling for the movement selection, stop, start, play, etc. And it also controls the LEDs and a few other things, lots of transistors, but there's one big chip there, and these switches actually go almost directly into that IC for controlling things. So what can I do about debouncing or whatever? Well, not a huge amount, because even the common for these switches goes directly into the IC. It doesn't go to a ground in the circuit at all. So that means whatever's happening is happening within that IC. So all I could do was basically try and smooth the supply. So I put a 330 nanofarad ceramic capacitor across the power to ground on the IC from pin 1 to pin 24. And then I also I added a 4.7 microfarad electrolytic just back a little bit on the supply. I think it's a 5.6 volt supply. I put those underneath the board, held them in place with a little bit of hot glue and soldered them in, and that should provide a little bit more stability for the supply for that chip, and I'm hoping that that will prevent any further untoward sort of button bouncing, switch bouncing. Right. Oh, and toward that end, on this little microswitch, between the black and the white wire, which is, I think it goes short when, I can't remember, but I think it goes short when the cassette is in and it opens. Anyway, on the black and the white, I put a 10 nanofarad capacitor across it, just to hopefully take up any arcing that might happen there. I know it's only low voltage, but every little bit helps. So I'm hoping that that 10N on the microswitch and the two capacitors on the supply for the IC, and that 330 nanofarad I put directly across the pins 1 and 24, straight across. So it should provide maximum filtering. What next? Of course, I got my measurement tapes and did a 1 kilohertz alignment tape on the mechanism to ensure that the height of this pinch roller was about right. It was all that you can adjust. There's nothing else to adjust. I used an azimuth tape to get it right. I used the Dolby tape to get a level right. Now I had a problem with that because it's 200 nanowebers per meter, which is not the standard tape to use for this machine. The tape that they say to use is a 250 nanoweber, and that gives approximately plus 4 dB typically. So mine's a 200, so it's 1.2 dB less. So I dropped 1.2 dB, which works out to be, in this voltage at the test point, instead of 1.12 volt, it works out to 0.98 volt. So it was already 0.96 and 0.94, so I just made them both 0.96, so about what they were, and I think that should be close enough. This is of course using a standard input level using my generator. I forget whether it was 1 volt or a 0.316 volt. I can't remember, but that all, it sort of all worked out. So there was the playback adjustments, there was record adjustments up near the rear of the machine, and there was also the response adjustments. So there was 4 near the back, 2 response and 2 level. And so with those, I'm pretty sure I've got it right. There's far too many adjustments in here, and when it come to doing all the Dolby stuff, I decided that I wouldn't try to do that. I'd only just get into more trouble than it's worth. And the Dolby seems to be working all right anyway. And to do all of that, you really have to go through a lot of levels and have accurate dB meters, which mine I'm discovering need calibrating. So I wasn't going to do all that, but I felt confident of those anyway. The other thing I did was adjust the bias for the tapes, and they were actually pretty close to what they should have been. They measure it by the return grounding shield, not the actual voltage going to the erase head or the record head. It's and they were pretty close. That like it was 12 millivolts, 9.5 millivolts, and one other level I forget now. But yeah, that worked out all right. Right, so and after all of that, tried recording tapes and making sure that what you record is as good as what you play back. And here's an example. Right, that's the source. Record. Source, tape, source, tape, source, tape, Dolby's on, Dolby off, Dolby on, Dolby off, Dolby on, source, tape. So basically it sounds pretty good, and in fact sounds excellent. So I think that's about it for this. It's probably the most curse-worthy part of the whole thing was having to physically manipulate the spring for the idler wheel. I kept thinking I shouldn't have to do that. Shouldn't have to, use a stronger spring. It should have been designed with the right spring in mind. But no. I had to butcher the spring to make it stronger. One day, hopefully, I'll have a whole little bucket full of new springs I can use, so I don't have to butcher it. But it was just the one spring. Everything else is good, and so I'm quite pleased actually with it, and I'm pretty sure the owner will be happy. And I'm only hoping that this debounce issue doesn't happen again. So you do all this, and these little lights used to go funny, but no, they're rock solid. That's what we want. I'm not sure how much Mr. YouTube will like of that. I'll edit out the music if it's flagged at all. Okie dokie. I think that's it. I'll put the covering back on now and make it look all beautiful.